Good morning. My name is Irwin Zalkin of the Zalkin Law firm. Thank you all for being here today. We called this press conference to talk about the Catholic Victims Compensation Fund that many of you might have heard about. There are 6 dioceses in the state of California that have put together a fund that would be administered by Ken Feinberg, who was the one who administered the 9/11 fund, and several similar funds that several dioceses in New York had done. And they've been doing a lot of promotion about this fund. I know many of our clients have received a package with a letter indicating that they should consider applying to this fund as an alternative to bringing a civil lawsuit, that they don't need an attorney, they can do this on their own, and this has been the push. I'm here and we are here to tell you today that this fund is a scam. It is a scam that is intended to try to lure victims in and tempt them with amounts of money that to some people would seem very significant, and with the hope that the victims of clergy sexual abuse by priests and others within the Catholic Diocese of California will accept these monies and forego all of their rights to bring a civil lawsuit. There's no coincidence to the establishment of this fund. This is very intentional, and I'll tell you why. Pending before the governor of the state of California, Governor Newsom, is a bill, AB 218, which has passed the legislature and would amend our childhood sexual abuse statute of limitations to allow victims, older victims, victims whose claims were time barred before, to now proceed with a lawsuit. Understanding the significance and the potential consequence of that, lo and behold, a fund emerges. And a promotion to victims to you don't need to file a lawsuit, and that's going to take you time, and you have to pay a lawyer. Come to us, trust us, we'll take care of you, we'll make it right because we really care. Well, if they really cared, why are they now establishing this fund only when it appears that they are going to be vulnerable to civil lawsuits by older victims? There's more to the problem with the fund. The fund has limitations. It's not an unlimited fund. So clearly, the more people who apply to the fund, the more diluted does everyone's potential claim become, because there's only so much money to go around. The other problem with the fund is that everything stays secret. Everything remains confidential. No exposure of who the priests are that are involved in these allegations. No documents will be produced to show how these abuses were covered up. No, it's all very secret. And it will be, it's a final settlement. There's no going back. And there's a very short window. They're telling you got to come in now. You got 6 months until March to come in and do this. And they're dangling and they're telling you, well, we've given away 6 figures. We've even given away as much as $500,000. Well, there was a window that passed in California similar to what's passed, but we hope will pass now. That was a 1-year opportunity in 2003. And in 2003, there were 1,000 or a little bit over 1,000 lawsuits filed by Catholic clergy and some others. And the diocese and their insurance companies in California paid out over $1 billion. The average case settled for $1.3 million. So when the fund is telling you that this is, we can give you 6 figures, 100,000, 200,000, maybe as much as 500,000, do the math. It's pennies of what the value of the harm that was done to these people is. The other issue with this fund is that they will tell you that you don't need a lawyer. You can just come in and do this by yourself. And to people who are not experienced, who don't know how to present their claim, don't know what matters, to those people, they may be very tempted. This is sales 101. Get them in the door. And once you get them in the door, close the deal. That's what this is all about. So we caution you as survivors of Catholic clergy sexual abuse. Don't be baited into this. And if you are going to go in and talk to the people or file an application, make sure you're consulting with an experienced attorney who can guide you through the process. So with that, I'd like to introduce a few people that have come here today to voice their concerns. I have Esther Miller Hatfield. Esther is a survivor, and she is a certified trauma coach and has been involved as an advocate for victims for years. John Ceveda, did I say that right? Chevette. John Chevette is a supporter here who lost his brother, who was a victim to Catholic sexual abuse. And I have Rita Villa, who is a survivor, and she too would like to address, and an advocate, and would like to address this. So I'm going to ask Esther to come up to the podium and talk to us.
Sure, absolutely. You know, what I want to say to those watching out there is that if you're a victim of clergy sexual abuse, you have two things going for you. You have voice and choice. You may not think so, but you do. So regarding this compensation fund, for that matter, listen up. It's vitally important and crucial for you to understand the pitfalls of this fund. The biggest thing for you to know as a crime victim, yes, you are a crime victim if you have been a clergy sexual abuse survivor, and that you now have options. Don't look at this compensation fund as a take it or leave it kind of situation, especially with the potential for a 3-year, 3-year window, a statute of limitation window that they could lift it open. And that's the AB 218 that Mr. Zalkin was talking about, because that bill now sits at the governor's desk. We're waiting for Governor Newsom to sign that any day now, right? This is nothing but a preemptive move by the Catholic Church to prevent and siphon off any victim who might have a robust, legitimate claim. So to jump at this measly fund so the church only pays pennies on the dollar is not beneficial for you. So here's some bad things of the compensation fund, some pitfalls. It lets the bishops off the hook for responsibility of decades-long cover-ups of hundreds of child rapists and sexual abusers. The other thing is that there's no accountability in a court of law. A perpetrator is going to remain hidden, and the cover-up of the bishops isn't disclosed at all with this type of fund. Then there's no notification, no disclosure of sexual predators, as other victims may be unable to come forward. So for example, a person comes into the compensation fund through this whole process with an accusation, right? But they aren't aware of maybe 12 other victims of that same perpetrator who've already come forward, right? Okay, then the perpetrator can now stay in active ministry because nobody else knows what's going on. This also means that church officials can put perps back into ministry, even after paying the victims. So bishops continue to hide these predators and cover up their complicity in the rape and sexual abuse of the vulnerable. Sadly, the bishop's cover-up continues with this fund. And then survivors really just don't get their day in court. Rita and myself, John's family went through litigation, and it was a watershed moment for us. That was really one of the big steps in our own self-healing journey. And once you sign away your right to sue the church, that's it. It's really a disservice to remove the survivor's right to sue. The other thing, the pitfall of this fund, is that it can't expose the wrongdoing of the systemic cover-up by the church. And we aren't able to enforce accountability if we just go through these funds, right? So the best way for these crimes to be made is to be made public, and for punishment and compensation to be meted out in the court system. And finally, this doesn't reform statutes of limitations, because it's still cloaked in silence and secrecy. But overall, the biggest issue is that no discovery whatsoever is done. So that means no documents, like I have here from my case, no documents. Their church isn't going to hand over these secret archive files, so no documents get released, no depositions are taken, no oath under discovery, information isn't released. We can't correct any misinformation once the documents come out so that things are made accurate. These documents that I have here in my possession, they show the trail of complicity. Who knew when, who knew what. They moved predator, priests, clerics, monks, nuns, lay leaders. They basically show the cover-up in these documents. That's why it's vitally important for the release of these documents, to safeguard the minors that were in their care. So all the church's secrets still remain secret, unlike in litigation. Good attorneys like Mr. Zalkin will have discovery and uncover and unearth the complicity. So basically the church still controls all the information. They control the process, they still have the power. The bishops want to pay out the very lowest sums of money now, rather than face the consequence of the 3-year window to justice, right? They do not want the public disclosure of how much sexual abuse has happened and how much sexual abuse is continuing to happen today, and how the bishops covered it up. I'll share with you from my own personal experience firsthand. You know, when I litigated, about 15 years ago now, right? It's like, wow, that was a long time ago. I would have never imagined that there was a paper trail of cover-up. My perps documents here, all recorded in secret files, shown on 215 pages, the complicity of evil. My plight was finally validated after I sued, after I got my day. For decades, I thought I was the only victim of the then Deacon Michael Nocita, but I wasn't. There were 9 other Father Nocita victims out there, and I've encountered and read about them, and in these documents, I know who they are. The church had prior notice, and I was a victim, even though the church had prior notice. So, in the meantime, we hope that any survivor out there listening and watching this will first make a report to the police, to your district attorneys, to our California Attorney General Becerra's office. Please make a report somewhere. Don't go to the church, and definitely don't run to this compensation fund until you've consulted with attorneys, right? Survivors out there, this is my wish for you, that you go from strength to strength in exercising your voice and choice, in self-advocating for yourselves and for others. If any of you out there watching this, listening to this, need support, care, compassion, or concern, please reach out to us. Rita's available, John's available, I'm available. And if you need experienced attorneys like Mr. Zalkin, he has done this his whole adult profession, right, to advocate for others. He can guide and guard your legal steps. If you choose to go into the compensation fund, do not go alone. Take Mr. Zalkin in with you. After all, you're going to the lion's den of justice there. You know, you're going to need protection and assistance, because these are men of God you're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just for the record, there are other good lawyers out there too. So.
I know.
Not trying to solicit anything here. Really, no. Our purpose is really we we just want to get the word out. That's the main thing for us. Rita, would you like to come up and say a few words?
And you know I'm a big fan of yours, so.
Hi, I'm Rita Mia, and I was abused by 7 priests. I have a daughter from one. One of my biggest things back when I was abused and I was beginning to break out of the cycle was the need for justice. When you're abused, your power gets taken away from you. And justice gives you some of that power back. When I went to the church, they investigated, they told me I was telling the truth, and they did not care. And that just like ripped everything out of me. It made me even more powerless than it used to be with the priest. Going to the church, they don't care about taking your power away. They don't care about shredding your soul. And they cannot be trusted. And then it's very obvious by the fact that they are not going to do anything to punish the people that you're naming if you go to them. They're not going to punish those priests. They're going to stay in ministry. And if they really cared about victims, they would care about not creating new victims. And they will create new victims by not exposing these priests. And that is the worst thing. And that also keeps you from getting your power back. Knowing that your perpetrator or your abuser is out there still abusing. It's just horrible. The church just tries to make itself look so good or so kind or so caring, but it's not true. If they were, they would not try to create more victims. To me, that's one of the worst things. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Just a point that I'd like to make. You know, the Catholic Conference of Bishops in California, the California Catholic Conference of Bishops, spent, I don't know, probably close to millions of dollars lobbying against AB 218, the bill that would now open a 3-year, and if it gets passed by the governor, will open a 3-year window of opportunity for older victims to pursue civil litigation. So they probably will spend more on that than they will on what they're willing to pay victims. So, I mean, it's so clear the motivation for this. But anyway, John, thank you. Would you?
Yes, I'm John Chevette, and Esther was talking about documents. In the case regarding my late brother, James Chevette, we got 2,200 pages in discovery, and he was a graduate of Loyola High School and charged a Jesuit with sexual abuse. And today, I guess, an opportunity to point out that the victims of religious orders, of religious priests and nuns, are not covered by this fund, and the Jesuits have a large presence in the Los Angeles Archdiocese, and we're in downtown Los Angeles right now. We're about 3 miles from Loyola High School, and in the around 1990, they had some abusers there. These people who are priests who were incredibly charged with abuse elsewhere. For instance, Father Eugene Colosimo, Father Gerald Lindner, Father Carlton Whitten. And about this same time, Father Alfred Naki was in an administrative position at Loyola High School, and he's probably the greatest defender of Father Gerald Lindner, who the Jesuit order has paid out $3 million in settlements in a number of lawsuits. And also around this same time, around 1990, Father Gordon Bennett was at Loyola High School, and so he's had a credible charge of sexual harassment of an adult, and he was made a bishop in Jamaica, and he apparently only lasted 2 years before this charge came about. And then he was brought back to Loyola University, which is right near Los Angeles International Airport. And I don't believe anybody was told there that he had a credible charge of sexual harassment of a young adult. And of course, there are plenty of young adults on the campus at Loyola University. So I just want to point out that maybe some of these names ring a bell, and maybe I don't know of any charges at Loyola University or Loyola High School against these named individuals, but there were charges against them in other locations. And Father Alfrednaki, no charge against him, but he seems to be a great defender of the Jesuits charged with abuse. And so I just want to close in saying that as far as I know, you don't go to the to this fund if you've been have a charge of abuse against a religious order like a Jesuit, a Carmelite, Franciscan, or any of the Catholic religious orders for women. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That's a good point. Thank you. Do we have any questions from anyone out there?
Yeah, Mr. Zalkin, a couple of questions. How long is this fund going to be available to the victims?
It runs through the middle of March, I believe. I don't have the exact date in March, but it runs through March.
And the other part of the question is, how do they determine on this compensation fund, how do they determine the amounts available to the victims?
Excuse me. Yeah. How do they determine the amounts available?
Yeah, how do they determine the amounts available to the victims?
So my understanding is that they're going to be using a schedule in part for determining. So if somebody had digital penetration of some kind, that's going to be worth so much. If it was fondling, that's worth so much. And to some extent, they probably will consider some other factors, individual factors, how it's impacted them and that sort of thing. But again, you're talking about a circumstance where you are dealing with a limited amount of money available, so it has to fit within the funds that are going to be available to them, and within the period of time that's available to Ken Feinberg and the administrators. And again, you know, they say this is an independent fund or an independently administered fund. And I'm not knocking Ken Feinberg. I don't know him personally, but I know of him, and I'm working with a firm in New York that worked with him on the 9/11 fund. I have nothing against him, and I'm sure he's going to do the best he can. But those are the limitations that he's facing. You know, that there's just so much money to go around, and the more people that have a claim to this money, by definition, that's going to be less per person. It just dilutes those values. So again, how they're gonna figure this out, they've got a lot to deal with in trying to do that. So that's why these are difficult to manage, I think.
One of the other concerns, Mr. Zalkin, that in the community that we have is that a lot of the victims come from all kinds of different backgrounds, but including a lot of victims from the Hispanic community. Has the diocese clearly explained the downfalls and the limitations and all of the restrictions of this fund to all communities, including clearly in their own language in Spanish to the Hispanic victims?
I know that the package that some of our clients have indicates that there's some Spanish, they can have Spanish translators or Spanish-speaking people available. But to what extent they've reached out to the community, explained this fully to the community, how the documentation to the community, I don't know for sure. I really don't know. I don't want to misrepresent it.
You know, Irwin, Rita and I are Latinas, and so with our culture, it's cloaked in silence and shame and secrecy. It was very difficult culturally for Latinas to come forward, and other Latinos that we know, that we've known each other through a self-support group. So they're gonna have to really reach out mightily to the Latino community here, because there were many, many litigants. When Rita and I litigated in 2003, there were a vast amount of Latino surnames, right, who finally got their day in court to seek justice by filing claims. But it was because we were bootstrapping. Rita and I were reaching out one-on-one. The church wasn't reaching out to those communities. Rita did a lot of Spanish media, a lot of interviews, right? So she took it upon herself. Carlos did, Steve Sanchez, so many of us reached out independently because the church was not doing enough back then. So I'm sure they're not going to be doing enough in this compensation fund to reach the Latino community. And so that they have a clear understanding of it, right? It's very difficult to explain this, the pitfalls and what they're waiving, the rights they're waiving away.
Especially in their own language. That's an important fact, that they have to really clearly identify the restrictions, limitations, and that's one thing that we're very concerned about.
Yes, yes. You have anything to say, Rita, about that?
Thank you. No, we, in fact, to your point, one of the practices of the Diocese of San Diego was to send problem priests to barrio communities, to desert communities, which were heavily populated by Latinos in the Imperial Valley, and then San Bernardino, which then became a diocese. It was an outgrowth of the San Diego Diocese, and they basically dumped their bad priests into the San Bernardino Diocese, which is also largely Latino. So there are a significant number of people impacted in the